What if one fleeting curiosity, one thought you never intended to act on, had the power to destroy everything you've worked for? What if the need to know more pulled you into a world you could never escape? I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would question her marriage. David was everything I could ask for, a good man, loving, dependable, and always there. Our life together was predictable, comfortable, perfect, really. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet restlessness started to grow. The life I had worked so hard to build began to feel like a well-worn routine, safe, but lacking something. One evening, as I mindlessly scrolled through my phone, an article caught my eye. What makes passion last? The secrets you've been missing. It was just a headline, something I thought would be easy to ignore. But that nagging curiosity, the thought I could never quite shake, had already been planted. Suddenly, the question started, what if I was missing out on something? What if passion could feel different? What if there was more than just the routine I had come to accept? It wasn't a desire to hurt anyone, least of all David. It wasn't that I was unhappy. But that one article, just a simple click, would lead me down a path I never saw coming. It started with curiosity, but it spiraled into something far bigger. Something I could never take back. It was a late night, and I was doing what I usually did, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. But that night, I stumbled upon something that stopped me in my tracks. Is it always better outside the marriage? The headline seemed like nothing, just another clickbait article I should have ignored. But something inside me couldn't let it go. I clicked. At first, I told myself I was just reading for fun, a harmless distraction. But the deeper I went, the more the questions kept coming. The more I read, the more I felt something stirring, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Was this normal? Was this curiosity or something more dangerous? Could there be something I was missing? Could there be something better out there, beyond the comfortable life I had with David? Doubt creeps in. I looked back at my marriage, David, my rock. He was everything I ever wanted, loving, dependable, steady. But when I thought about our physical relationship, the word that kept coming to mind was predictable. Was that it? Was that all there was? Our intimacy had become routine, a comforting familiarity, but somewhere deep inside, I couldn't help but wonder, could there be more? I loved him, I truly did, but was there something out there I hadn't experienced yet? Was I just settling? The thought took root, planted by that one innocent question, and no matter how much I tried to push it away, it lingered, like a whisper I couldn't ignore. The forbidden thought. I couldn't stop myself. I started searching for more, articles, forums, personal stories. The stories of others intrigued me. Some spoke of desire outside the marriage, of longing, of excitement, of feeling alive in a way I hadn't in years. With each new story, the curiosity inside me grew. What was I missing? Was it wrong to wonder? I had never once thought this way about my marriage, but now the thought felt like a shadow I couldn't escape. But as much as I told myself I was just curious, something told me this wasn't innocent anymore. It wasn't just about satisfying my questions, it was about something deeper, something I had buried for so long. I shouldn't have, but I did. I went further. One night, with the words of those stories echoing in my head, I found myself doing something I never thought I would. I created a profile on a dating website. A fake name, no photo, just a vague description of what I was looking for. I told myself it was just a what-if scenario, a harmless way to satisfy my curiosity without actually crossing any lines. But deep down, I knew what this was. I knew I was opening a door I could never close again. What was I looking for? I couldn't even answer that myself. But once the door was open, there was no turning back. Then came Liam. His messages were exactly what I had hoped for, flirty, exciting, but respectful. He was younger than David, and from the very first conversation, I could feel the electricity. Liam wasn't like the men I was used to. There was something about him, something magnetic that pulled me in. It started as small talk, but soon the messages became more personal. The compliments, the playful teasing, the way he made me feel seen, it was thrilling. I never once felt judged. He didn't push me, he didn't make me feel cheap. Instead, I felt alive, like a part of me I hadn't known was there had been awakened. He made it clear, it was just a one-time thing, no strings attached. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. But every message he sent made me feel like I was living a double life. Every word pulled me deeper, and before I knew it, the idea of meeting him in person wasn't a question anymore, it was inevitable. I should have stopped. I should have listened to that voice inside my head telling me to walk away. But Liam's words kept coming, each one like a spark on dry tinder. His compliments made me feel things I hadn't felt in ages, desired, wanted, alive in a way I hadn't been in years. The routine with David had dulled that feeling, and now, here was someone who made me feel special. I told myself it wasn't serious, that it was just a game. But deep down, I knew I was getting hooked. His messages, the way he made me feel, the thought of what could be, it all became an obsession. And I couldn't stop. For the first time in a long time, I felt like me again. Not someone's wife, not someone's mother, but someone who was desired. And I wasn't sure I wanted to stop chasing that feeling. The night before I was supposed to meet Liam, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a war zone, half of me screaming that this was a terrible idea, the other half telling me I deserved this, that I was just curious and needed to know if what we'd shared online could become something real. I had told myself it was just to see if the chemistry was real. Just a meeting, a simple conversation, nothing more. But as the hours ticked down, I could feel something shifting inside me. Curiosity had already morphed into something else, a need. I was no longer sure if I was walking into this meeting to satisfy curiosity or to fulfill a longing I had buried for years. I arrived at the hotel early, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I could feel the weight of what I was about to do, pressing down on me with every breath. It was a small, upscale hotel, discreet but not cheap. The perfect balance of anonymity and comfort, just the kind of place I needed. The lobby was quiet, calm, but inside, I was anything but. The air felt thick with anticipation. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to drive away, to leave before I made a choice I couldn't take back. But I couldn't move. I was here, and there was no going back. I saw him the moment I stepped inside. Liam was standing near the elevator, a small smile playing on his lips as our eyes met. I was taken aback. He was even more handsome than his photos, more confident than I imagined. The chemistry between us was instant, undeniable, like we had known each other for years. It felt surreal. He walked toward me, and for a moment, I was frozen. But then, before I could think twice, he took my hand in his, warm, strong, and led me up to the room. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else. The door clicked shut behind us, and all pretense of restraint, of hesitation, fell away. We didn't speak at first. The silence was thick with desire, and the air between us crackled. It was as if nothing else existed in that moment but him and me. And in that moment, I forgot everything, forgot David, forgot my vows, forgot the life I had built. There was only now, only this. The experience with Liam was unlike anything I had ever felt before. It wasn't just the physical connection, though that was undeniable, it was the raw intensity of it, the way he made me feel like I was the most important thing in the world. With David, our intimacy had become comfortable, predictable, almost mundane. But with Liam, everything was new, exhilarating, electrifying. Every touch, every kiss was different, alive. For the first time in years, I felt like me again, not just someone's wife or a mother, but a woman, desired and free. It was an escape from the monotonous routine of my life, and I couldn't stop myself. I lost myself in the moment, in him. The intensity of it all left me breathless, overwhelmed, and, as the time passed, I found myself yearning for more. But that didn't make sense, did it? I was married. I had everything I needed with David, didn't I? Yet with Liam, I felt a fire I hadn't known I was missing, and I couldn't shake it. The freedom, the passion, it was intoxicating, and I didn't know how to let it go. When it was over, we lay there in silence. I didn't know what to say. There were so many things I should have been thinking about, what I had just risked, the betrayal I had just committed, but my mind was a blur of satisfaction and confusion. Liam kissed me gently on the forehead and said, "If you ever want to do this again, you know where to find me." The simplicity of his words, the calm way he said it, made it sound almost casual. Like it was nothing. But it was everything. And deep down, I knew it wasn't just a one-time thing. I had crossed a line, and I could feel the pull to do it again already. I didn't know how to feel. Thrilled? Terrified? Both. The ride back home was a haze, my thoughts racing as I replayed every moment in my mind. His touch. His words. The thrill of the secret I had just created. But as I drove, I couldn't stop thinking about the man I was going back to, the man who trusted me, who loved me. How could I look David in the eyes knowing what I had just done? How could I live with this? But even with the guilt gnawing at my insides, part of me was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. The question haunted me as I drove home: how could I ever go back to just being his wife, when this new part of me had awakened? I walked through the door, and David was right there, as he always was. His smile, his warm embrace, it was everything I needed in that moment. Or so I told myself. He was completely unaware of what had just happened, of what I had just done. His love was unwavering, his devotion clear, and as I looked into his eyes, something inside me twisted. The guilt hit me harder than any physical blow could. How could I look him in the eye after betraying him like this? How could I pretend everything was normal when my insides were unraveling? As the days passed, I could feel the distance growing between David and me, even though I was doing everything I could to act as if nothing had changed. On the outside, I was still the same wife, attentive, loving, present. But on the inside, it felt like a storm was brewing. Every time David touched me, held me, kissed me, I couldn't help but compare it to what I had with Liam. And no matter how hard I tried to convince myself that David was enough, the truth was becoming harder to deny. Every kiss with Liam, every touch, had awakened something in me, a part one hadn't realized I'd been missing. And now, with David, every touch felt like it wasn't enough. I wanted more. In an attempt to make things right, I became more attentive to David. I cooked his favorite meals, I kissed him more often, I asked about his day. I thought I could compensate for what I'd done, pretending everything was perfect. But the truth was, every action felt like an act, a performance. A way to mask the guilt that weighed heavily on my chest. I was hiding behind a facade, desperately trying to convince myself that everything could go back to normal. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of something I couldn't control. And every time I lied, every time I hid my emotions, I felt more trapped. It didn't take long for Liam to reach out again. I had told myself it was a one-time thing, a moment of weakness. But when his name lit up my phone, my heart skipped a beat. I was supposed to be over it. I was supposed to be moving on. But I wasn't. And the worst part was, I didn't want to be. His messages were simple at first, casual, just checking in. But each one seemed to pull me further in. I told myself it was just for closure, just to get some peace of mind. But deep inside, I knew I was lying to myself. The truth was, the pull to Liam wasn't curiosity anymore, it was need. When we met again, I felt a wave of both excitement and fear. The tension between us was immediate, as if we were picking up exactly where we left off. But this time, it was different. The connection was deeper, more intense. Liam wasn't just a man who made me feel alive, he was everything David wasn't. He was spontaneous, exciting, and dangerous. Every word he spoke, every touch, made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about the physical connection, it was the emotional liberation that came with it. With Liam, I could be myself, uninhibited, free, alive. And that feeling was addicting. I knew this wasn't just about an affair anymore. This wasn't just about satisfying some curiosity. This was an addiction. The way Liam made me feel, desired, cherished, alive, was a high I couldn't stop chasing. The lies came easier with time. I continued the facade with David, pretending everything was normal, pretending I was the loving wife I once was. I was good at it. I could smile, kiss him, go through the motions of our routine, and then sneak off to see Liam whenever I needed that fix. Each meeting with Liam felt like an escape, a way to reclaim a part of myself that I had lost in the predictability of my marriage. Every lie was a little more convincing, a little less painful. But deep down, I knew this was spiraling out of control. I had told myself it was just for the excitement, but it was so much more than that. I was hooked. And with every lie, with every secret meeting, the guilt ate away at me, but the addiction to Liam's touch, his presence, overshadowed everything else. I was losing control, and I couldn't stop. David had started to notice. At first, it was small things, how I'd become distracted at dinner, how my eyes seemed distant, how I'd sometimes catch myself lost in thought when he was speaking to me. He didn't say anything outright, but I could feel the change. I knew he could sense something wasn't right. His warmth, his constant attention, he became overly affectionate, maybe in an attempt to fill the space he felt growing between us. I could see the concern in his eyes whenever he looked at me, but he didn't ask, not directly. Maybe he was afraid of the answer, or maybe he was trying to convince himself it was all in his head. But it didn't stop there. He began to check in more, asking if I was okay, trying to get me to talk more about my day, my thoughts, anything that might reassure him. It should have felt comforting, but instead, it just made the guilt worse. I could see it in his face, he knew something was wrong. And yet, I was the one who had broken us, and I had to watch him suffer in silence. He didn't know why, but I could feel him retreating emotionally, perhaps as a defense mechanism. That was the hardest part, watching him try so hard, while I was hiding the truth from him. With every passing day, the divide between David and me grew wider. I had to juggle a life of pretenses, smiling, cooking, playing the part of the loving wife while my mind was elsewhere, consumed by thoughts of Liam. Each secret rendezvous with him felt like stepping into a world where no one knew me as a wife or a mother, just as me. And it was thrilling. Liam became my escape. The excitement of keeping the secret, the adrenaline of lying, of deceiving David, was becoming more and more addictive. I rationalized it in my head, David doesn't need to know. I'm still here for him, still trying to make it work. This is just a phase. It's not like I'm leaving him for Liam. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't just a phase, it was a growing part of me, something I didn't want to give up. And each time I met Liam, each time I felt his hands on me, I felt the pull stronger than ever, leaving me numb to the consequences. I started telling myself I could manage it, that I could keep both worlds separate. I convinced myself that as long as David didn't suspect, as long as I was still his loving wife on the outside, nothing would change. But I was lying to myself, and to him. The truth was, I was falling deeper into a double life I didn't know how to escape from. But eventually, the lie became too hard to keep up. The weight of it pressed down on me like a vice, and no matter how much I tried to pretend everything was normal, it wasn't. It was as if the facade had begun to crack, and I could no longer ignore the truth. I loved David. I really did. But what I had with Liam, it was different. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. He made me feel seen in ways David hadn't in years. The thrill of being desired, of stepping into a world where I wasn't just someone's wife, it consumed me. But the guilt was unbearable. With every lie, with every stolen moment, I could feel myself losing touch with who I once was. Who was I becoming? And how much longer could I keep this up? The thought of being found out, of losing David forever, terrified me, but the thought of giving up Liam terrified me even more. It was during one of our secret meetings that Liam said something that hit me like a lightning bolt. We were lying together, tangled in the sheets, the rush of our passion slowly fading into a quiet moment, and he turned to me with a serious look on his face. "You know, this can't go on forever, right?" he said, his voice low and steady. "You have a good life, Ella. A husband who loves you. But you can't keep juggling both worlds. One of them is going to break." His words cut through me. It was like everything I had been ignoring, everything I had been running from, suddenly rushed to the surface. I had been pretending that I could keep living this lie, that I could have both men, both lives. But Liam was right. I couldn't keep pretending forever. Something would give. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. For the first time, I wasn't just lying to David, I was lying to myself. And I had to face the fact that I couldn't keep living this double life without consequences. The person I was becoming, someone who could betray the man who loved her, someone who thought she could hide her heart in two places, wasn't someone I wanted to be. The weight of everything crashed down on me that night. I sat in my car outside Liam's place, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was torn in two. On one side, the life I had with David, the security, the love that had been built over years. On the other, the fire, the passion, the danger of what I had with Liam. But as I sat there, the reality settled in. I had lost myself somewhere in this affair, and the person I had become, someone who could betray the one person who trusted her the most, was someone I didn't want to be. It wasn't just the thrill of the affair, it was the guilt, the shame, and the truth of what I had nearly thrown away. I loved David. I loved him in a way I had forgotten. And as much as the pull to Liam had consumed me, I couldn't keep living in two worlds. I had to choose. I had to choose David. It was the hardest decision I had ever made. But I knew deep down, this was the only way forward. It wasn't just about saving my marriage, it was about saving myself from the woman I had become. So I made the call, one final goodbye to Liam. The moment I told Liam it was over, I felt a piece of me break. His face, his eyes, they were the same, but the chemistry that once sparked between us had fizzled out in the face of something much more painful, the reality of what I was losing. He didn't fight me. He didn't beg me to stay. His only words were, "I get it, Ella. But don't expect me to wait forever." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't easy. It was raw, it was real, and it hurt in a way I didn't expect. Walking away from Liam, the man who had made me feel alive again, was harder than I could ever describe. But in that moment, I knew I was doing what was best for me, for my marriage, for everything I had nearly destroyed. It was over. And as painful as it was, it felt like the right choice. When I walked through that door, I knew things would never be the same. David was sitting at the kitchen table, his smile warm, but I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. The moment he looked at me, he knew something had shifted. But I couldn't tell him everything, not yet. There were parts of me I would carry for a lifetime, secrets I would carry in silence. "I'm home," I said, and it felt both like a relief and a deep ache. I had come back, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy to put the pieces back together. The trust one had broken, the love I had nearly lost, it wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. But I was here, and that's all I could offer. Rebuilding with David was slow, painful. There were days when I could barely look at him, days when the guilt ate me alive. But there were moments too, moments when I felt that spark of hope. When I realized I could be a better version of myself, not because of who I was before the affair, but because of who I was after. I had learned a hard lesson, one that would stay with me forever. I could never go back to the way things were before, but I was determined to move forward. David and I began to rebuild. It wasn't perfect. Some days, I wanted to tell him everything, but I knew some truths were too painful to bear. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: my marriage, my real life, was worth more than any fleeting thrill. It had always been about more than passion, it was about trust, love, and the willingness to grow together, even after everything had fallen apart. What would you do? I've asked myself this question 1,000 times. Could I have avoided the affair? Could I have stopped before it got out of hand? Could I have saved myself from the pain, from the heartache of almost losing everything? Maybe. But here I am, still standing with David. Still choosing him. What would you do if you were me? Would you choose the safety of your marriage, or the fleeting excitement of the unknown? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories of love, betrayal, and redemption. Your voice matters. Join the conversation, and let's continue exploring what happens when desire meets regret.